Now, on the Georgia vote, we take a closer look at the big issues under the Gold Dome, including a conversation with Senate Republican leader John Kennedy about GOP priorities for 2025.
Plus, we ask State Senator Josh McLaurin how Democrats can respond and stay competitive.
And our voice of the voter wants to heal the community through hemp, but also has a message for her elected officials. All right now on the Georgia Vote.
From the 11 Alive studios, this is the Georgia Vote with Faith Jesse and Zach Merchant.
Hey, good Sunday morning. Welcome to the Georgia Vote. A big and boisterous crowd greeted Georgia Republican Congressman Rich McCormick at his town hall in Roswell this week.
Hundreds of people packed City Hall and overflow rooms, and many others were turned away because of space constraints. Members of the crowd asked several questions about the Trump administration's plans for massive government cuts via the new Department of Government Efficiency. One questioner asked the congressman about cuts to the Atlanta-based CDC, where around 700 probationary employees were forced out last week.
I've talked to CDC directors, and I'm in close contact with them, and I know how they do their research. And I know how computers work in ferreting out those information, the treatments, the recommendations, what they should and they shouldn't be done. And I believe that they could do more with less, just like the Marine Corps and everybody else does, when you have to do more with less in order to succeed.
The questioner then brought up the Trump administration having to retract some firings of federal employees involved in nuclear work and the fight against bird flu.
I understand trying to do more with less. That's reasonable. What's not reasonable is taking this chainsaw approach, which they obviously admit when they fired these people and then decided, oh, we fired the wrong people. We got to bring them back in. Why is this being jammed down the pipe so rushed and sloppily?
So my understanding is when you say you have this many employees that you have to cut, that organization decides who they're going to cut. Now they may make...
They do not.
They're being forced to cut, but not necessarily.
They're not choosing.
Now we can debate all day whether they should be cut or not. But the fact of the matter is there's going to be a downsizing government, just like we've had in the past, downsizing the military.
Congressman McCormick later told the crowd he respected the difference of opinion and the honest discussion, which the crowd politely cheered.
Well, the often talked about relationship between President Trump and Georgia Governor Brian Kemp appears to be, at least publicly, on solid ground. The president gave the governor a shout out Thursday night at the Republican governor's dinner in Washington.
I especially want to thank the chairman of the Republican Governors Association, Brian Kemp, who was fantastic. He was fantastic. We won Georgia by a lot. Where's Brian? We won Georgia by a lot. Where are you, Brian? There you are. We did a great job together, and I appreciate it. We won't forget it. Thank you, Brian.
Now, we know Governor Kemp is the chair of the Republican Governors Association. He talked up the partnership between the RGA and the president.
He knows, just like we do, that winning is a team sport. And I think I can speak for everyone in this room and millions of Americans across the country tonight in saying that we are excited and thankful to have a new quarterback calling the plays.
Well, in other news, it is official. Another former Georgia member of Congress joins the Trump administration. This past week, the Senate confirmed former Senator Kelly Loeffler to lead the Small Business Administration. Loeffler joins former Congressman Doug Collins, who is the Secretary of Veterans Affairs.
And the Georgia legislative session is nearing the halfway mark, and Republican Governor Brian Kemp, his top priority, tort reform, is closer to becoming law. It passed the state Senate on Friday, and it now heads to the state House. In our first Sunday conversation of this week's show, Democratic State Senator Josh McLaurin responds to the tort reform push and charts a path forward for Democrats in a new era where Republicans control the federal government. Where do you stand on tort reform?
So the way that the bill is drafted, I'm opposed. What I would like to see, and what some of my Democratic colleagues would like to see, is we're calling insurance reform, which is we need to hold the insurance companies accountable. If they have a policy with you that you've been dutifully paying premiums on, they need to cover you, their end of the bargain, when you get hurt or when you have a loss. They have been unwilling to do that historically. And these billions of dollars of profit, with a B, they need to be accountable for returning some of those profits in the form of premium rebates and refusing to increase premiums when things are going well for those big insurance companies.
Governor Kemp and his supporters argue that through, in many cases, what they view as excessive jury verdicts, insurance premiums have gone up in our state over the recent however many years. They are, in turn, proposing this tort reform package that they say will limit the amount people in certain cases can recover if they succeed in a civil suit. And they say that those limits then, in turn, would reduce insurance premiums.
So that's their story.
Right.
Right.
So that's where
Right.
that's just so we're level setting here.
Right.
That's their argument. Your response to that would be what?
A couple things. First of all, ask yourself why 6 or 12 randomly selected people from your community in a jury would do the wrong thing when put in a position to decide how much harm has happened, right? The cases that go to these so-called nuclear verdicts, you'll hear that as a scare word thrown around, these big verdicts that some juries, again, this is pretty rare, the bigger verdicts over, tens of millions of dollars, that sort of thing. These are juries that are told the whole story from start to finish, not sound bites. I mean, you and I get to talk for, 5 minutes? But if you sit in a jury room and you listen to evidence over the course of weeks about how a corporation knew that they built a defective product that could hurt people, or a trucking company refused to train its drivers even though they knew that there was a certain risk factor with their trucks operating a certain way, right? A lot of times when a big verdict comes down, it's because the jury in question has presented evidence that the corporation knew that it was doing something wrong, and it knew that it was saving money maybe by cutting corners, and that might hurt people. And then when the insurance company got the claim, the insurance company knew that it was probably a good claim, but stretched out some family that doesn't have means to hire, whatever lawyers for years, potentially 2, 3 or more years, to try to delay and deny the claims until finally the family gets to a courtroom after years of waiting, tells the jury everything that's happened, and the jury gets mad. This is not a surprising thing.
So your view on this is that tort reform as presented right now, it would not reduce insurance premiums, and it would reduce the likelihood that people who are legitimately hurt can fully recover their damages.
That's it.
Democrats suffered a bad loss in November. Republicans now control the House, the Senate, the Oval Office, and not as a direct result of the 2024 presidential election, but nonetheless also control a majority of the seats in the United States Supreme Court. Where do national Democrats, and by proxy, state Democrats like yourself, go from here as a party?
What Democrats need to do is find our energy, find our zeal for the very institutions that we fear are under attack right now, that we're defending. You can't just say the other guy's bad, the other guy's doing all this bad stuff, the things I like. You've got to explain to the public why we like those things. Why do we care that Congress controls the power of the purse, and that when Congress appropriates money, separation of powers requires that the president spend it. Elon Musk can't just run around deciding not to spend money that Congress has allocated. If you want to fix it, you go to Congress. But we've got to be excited in telling the public we still have a constitutional republic, a rule of law that's worth defending because it guarantees our rights, it guarantees our economic success, and we don't have to resort to fear of the other, fear of difference of other people to try to improve our own situation.
And that is just part of our conversation. To see McLaurin's stance on other major bills pending in the legislature and hear why he is worried about where he thinks the federal government is headed, look for our full interview. It is streaming for free right now on the 11 Alive Plus app, available on Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV.
And straight ahead, we go one-on-one with Republican Senator John Kennedy, who's carrying Governor Kemp's top priority through the Senate. And later, our voice of the voter is aiming to cultivate relaxation through hemp. But she says it's been a battle here in Georgia. Well, this legislative session, Governor Brian Kemp made it very clear to Georgia lawmakers that his tort reform plan must pass. Tort reform or litigation reform, it aims to reduce large jury rewards, or what they're calling nuclear verdicts. The governor says his plan will benefit business owners and bring insurance prices down. GOP Senate Leader John Kennedy carried the bill through the Senate, and I asked him when Georgians will see their insurance rates go down if this passes. Do we know, would it take a year for them to start seeing that decrease, 10 years?
There's no way to know. Certainly don't think it'll be 10 years, but there's no way to put a particular time frame on it. The one time frame I can give you is that if we don't pass tort reform this year, what we are guaranteed to happen tomorrow, next week, and next year is our premiums will continue to go up. We're trying to do something to stabilize this market so that those prices, the premiums will stabilize over time with greater competition and better rules on how civil tort actions are brought and managed and resolved. That will bring stability to the market, which will reverse this trend that we've had for so long.
Do you all have like a ballpark of how much money people could save? I know you mentioned insurance premiums would go up if this doesn't pass. Is there a trend that you're seeing of how much more people will be paying or how much less they would be paying if this passes?
Well, if you look at the increases that folks have been suffering under for the last 2 to 3 years, it's typically double digits, depending upon the business or the profession that you're in. If you talk to some of our medical care professionals, particularly people in the OBGYN sector, they will tell you they have seen 50, 60, 70% increases in their malpractice insurance. What has that done? That is make doctors make decisions about not coming to Georgia and going to other states where those medical malpractice premiums are a small fraction of what they would pay here in Georgia. What is that causing? That's causing a lack of care and availability of medical services to Georgians. I'm from a small town in southeast Georgia. I know rural Georgia. That's particularly a problem when you're in an area where doctors aren't just down the street. So it touches so many different areas of our society. So that's why the overall picture is trying to bring that stability back to these markets so that rates will go down. But the ripple effect will be very positive for Georgians, for job creators, for businesses, and quite frankly, for all of us.
Are you confident that if this passes this year, the tort reform, that it will be a different scenario than what we saw 20 years ago when there was sweeping tort reform legislation that was basically blocked by judges in Georgia?
Yes, I would say that this bill is very targeted. For example, one of the provisions deals with what a lot of people think of as premises liability problems, and that is where simply because you're a landowner or you operate a business, a commercial business, whether it's a very small one or a large one, that we now are in an environment where people will sue for anything that happens on the property. And some of the examples that people are familiar with is where third-party actors, such as criminals, come on someone's property, engage in some criminal conduct, someone gets harmed or, God forbid, gets killed, and then they decide to sue the property owner, even though the property owner was totally uninvolved. We are in this bill addressing the issue of negligent security. And that is, what are the guardrails and what are the standards when someone can be claimed successfully to have not provided proper security for someone being on the property. So that's one example of where it's targeted. The other areas, the 9 or the 8 different sections in the bill, are very targeted. They're very limited, and they don't, for example, contain caps that were part of the tort reform measures years ago. So yes, I think this bill is entirely sustainable. In fact, I've not even heard the suggestion that there's some problem with that.
Well, that full interview is also available on 11 Alive Plus. Time now for our political roundtable. Today we have Republican strategist and pollster Mark Roundtree, also an expert on campaigns here in Georgia, and is the founder and president of Landmark Communications, based right here in Atlanta. And Fal Sabah, the assistant vice president at McGuire Woods Consulting and former executive director of the Georgia House Democratic Caucus. Thank you both so much for returning, both returning panelists. We want to start off with Governor Kemp's top priority this legislative session that both of our newsmakers touched on: tort reform, litigation reform, whatever you want to call it. This week, we know that SB 68, part of this plan, did pass the Senate en route to crossover day to head to the House. Governor Kemp is taking a hardline approach on this. Val, I want to start off with you because I know that you are in and out of under the Gold Dome basically every single day. As we look to the House, is this going to be an uphill battle to get this passed?
I don't know about uphill battle, but it is certainly going to be a battle. I think the governor putting his thumb on the scale pretty significantly yesterday, I think that that's going to help out quite a bit. It will be interesting to see how the Republican attorneys in the House, how they deal with this legislation, and if they make any amendments or anything to it.
Yeah, and Mark, we know that Cody Hall told the AJC this week that Governor Kemp is taking a very hard line to this, even almost threatening some endorsements for primaries or just future elections. Why take such a hardline approach here?
Well, this is not one of those kind of issues that is simply ideological. This isn't a Republican-Democrat issue in a simple sense. And this kind of issue is a very strange one for Governor Kemp to have taken on in his final 2 years, because this is the kind of issue that can kind of wrap around the wheels and cause a crash. This is a tough issue.
Why is that, Mark? I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think for somebody who's watching this, and maybe they're used to watching other news programs, maybe cable news programs, that a lot of flashy stuff goes on there, and they hear these kind of, some would call red meat issues, social issues that dominate the headlines. This is, in some ways, kind of a inside baseball kind of topic. Why make this the priority?
The hard part about this is actually within the Republican Party. The more MAGA side of the Republican Party is not in love with either corporate giant entity, the insurance company or the trial lawyers. And there is a schism among that group in particular. Among which group? Do you side with some of the libertarian MAGA side, go with the trial lawyers saying, we shouldn't limit our rights, and they kind of go into that. The other side is you have maybe the more establishment Republicans, and then some of the MAGA types that are maybe not quite so libertarian, and they seem to be going in the other direction. So I think the schism is mostly within the Republican Party. I think Democrats are fairly uniform against it, but it's getting this through. You have a very small margin of Republicans that you can afford to lose in the state house. I mean, you lose a dozen of them, and it's probably dead, or close to that, maybe 15 you can afford to lose.
And I'd say that's why we're seeing this. These words come from the governor's office here, Zach.
I want to stay on this topic for just one more moment, because we've talked about a lot of big legislative topics in the session this year. But quickly, Fal, first to you, is tort reform arguably the most up in the air big topic right now in terms of whether it will get passed by the end of the session?
It's certainly the most pressing one and the most highlighted one. There are a few other bills that have been going through, but nothing like tort reform. Tort reform has really taken center stage. We've heard rumors about sports betting, and it seems we hear about it, and then we don't hear about it, and then we hear about it again. So, I mean, anything is game right now, leading up to crossover day, which will be in about 2 weeks.
We're going to take a pause right here. We'll see you guys on the other side of the break. We'll be right back.
Well, welcome back. We are back with our political roundtable here. Let's jump right back in. Georgia was a cornerstone of the presidential campaign in 2024, and now we're seeing in the new Trump administration a lot of Georgia influence in the new cabinet now, right, Mark?
Yes, that is true. And just this week we had Kelly Loeffler being confirmed, and that was, I believe, a 52-46 vote. There was one Democrat that they picked up to vote for that.
And Doug Collins, too.
And Doug Collins, of course, he as well, but he was a couple weeks ago. But yes, so I think Georgia is getting some representation, direct communication with the president.
And Fal, what does that mean when a state has sort of that much face time vis-a-vis their sort of former elected officials with the new president?
I think that's a great thing for Georgia. I mean, I think that we can get Georgia's priorities front and center. I think that's something that's going to be beneficial to us as we continue to grow our state and become, continue being the number one state to do business.
I want to ask you guys this really quick. We have 30 seconds. Move fast and break things. This is something that we hear in the tech industry, right? Is this what we're seeing with the Department of Government Efficiency? We know that Elon's heading that department. He's a tech guy. And we saw 700 layoffs at the CDC here in Atlanta. Fal and then Mark.
With billions in proposed cuts already being made, and probably lots of billions more coming in as proposals. So, I mean, that is sort of unprecedented in what they're doing. I'd say that is moving fast is an understatement.
And the breaking part is I read the other day that they had fired a bunch of nuclear engineers that they scrambled to rehire because they needed them to be there to figure out what to do. And so I think that part of the moving fast is that they're going to be breaking a lot of things.
We'll certainly see. Thank you both so much. We'll be right back.
Thank you, guys.
After the break. Well, this week, our Voice of the Voter takes us to a CBD dispensary in Avondale Estates called Hemp Haven. The owner, Deanna Padron, says that her goal is to help heal and bring relaxation to her community through hemp. She says that heavy restrictions and limited support from her elected officials are obstacles.
We are at 2765 East College Avenue in Avondale Estates, Georgia. Let's see here, I've been here for 7 years. We sell a lot of drinks. The state is becoming more consumable. We sell a lot of gummy. This is a Kona CBD Delta 8 cream. This works wonders. Put a little bit on your knee and it gives you 4 to 5 hours of relief.
So it's muscle relaxation?
Yes.
What's different between the products that you would find in your store compared to what you would find in a California, a Colorado?
Everything that we're allowed to sell comes from the hemp plant. Everything they're allowed to sell comes from the marijuana plant, which is high THC, low CBD. The hemp plant is high CBD, low THC. As the laws change, we pivot. Like right now, we can't sell flour, but we're allowed to sell pre-rolls.
How do you feel the state of politics and how our elected officials are doing right now in Georgia or even nationally? Like, what comes to mind for you?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is they're not taking care of small businesses. We are the backbone of this country, and they're not taking care of us. My store got burglarized, and the city of Avondale blamed it on me. We had been selling CBD and THCA flower freely since 2017. And then October 1st, they said it was all illegal. I lost 40% of my business, and I saw smoke shop after smoke shop just close down.
What would you say is your biggest concern right now?
Well, I think one of the biggest concerns that we face every day is just keeping the store open. You know, like, I enjoy what I do. This is a place, this is my community. I live right down the street. So, of course, I want to keep my business open and thriving. But in between the construction that they have forced on us, the city of Avondale, the burglaries, I'm getting burglarized every 2 months.
What are you most optimistic about?
Well, I am most optimistic that one day we are getting closer to federal legalization. Because let me tell you, all my issues and problems will go away once they start getting their admin together and taxing us properly and making sure that, you know, all of our stuff is compliant.
Yeah, and Deanna, she is a mom of 4. She
Wow.
owns 2 locations, so she just hopes that it's going to be a positive direction for the business.
One of those state-by-state things. We'll see what happens here.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for watching us today.
We hope to see you back here next Sunday at 11 for another edition of the Georgia Vote.